When my dad was 13, he did something no 13-year-old should do, and he moved countries to come to the United States. His dad did what any sane dad wouldn't do, and he let him come with $100 to his name. It was a hip thing to do at the time, and my dad really, really wanted to get away from all that farm work and just go strive for himself. He found a train to take him for $50, and he was so happy, even though he slept with the roaches, the mouses, the rats. Once he got to the United States, he landed in El Paso, Texas, and the first thing he did was get a cheeseburger. And he just put a big grin on his face, and he was as happy as he's ever been. He stayed in a motel, and he started cleaning with the cleaning crew. After, I think, 5 months in El Paso, Texas, he finally gathered enough money to get a train to California, which was like heaven to him. It was like if God walked there himself. And once he got to California, he stayed in a in a barn with his friends. And he would often try to get robbed and beaten, and the cows would try to get taken away while his friend was off somewhere else doing something, and he would try to protect himself with a lead pipe. So once he realized that that's not what he should be doing, and after all that work he's been through, he can't be just repeating that, he decided to get a lot of money and moved to San Jose, California, which was my birthplace. And he stayed there until he got a lot of money, and he worked hard. He got another job as a cleaning crew, and then he was basically living comfortable. It was an American dream. He was living in a hotel, had a good job, and he was just as happy as ever been. And one of his friends got deported back, and that really just kind of broke him down. And he thought all of his hard work to like get here and to stay here and be successful was just gonna get washed away. But he didn't let that get in his mind and just kept thinking of the positives. So when he was 18, he finally bought his own house. He had a brand new car, and he was living his American dream. And it's crazy how at 13 he was moving countries, and I'm over here as comfortable as I can be playing Xbox at my house. And at 16, he was working hard and trying to become his own man. And I'm writing about what he was doing at 16. What is success without hard work, determination, and to strive for your best?
Okay. So my mom comes from a small town in Mexico called Neucla. She was raised by her great-grandmother and lived with her uncles and aunties. She was left at a very young age by my grandmother with a younger sister, just a couple months old. So for her, she had to live, they were a very poor family, so they had to struggle to go to school, and they struggled even to just make it by every month. Because my grandmother didn't work, so it was just her uncles and aunties that worked to make sure that they had food. My mom had to, for her, in order to go to school, she had to walk a couple minutes to get to the bus, and then from the bus she got dropped off, and she had to walk more to get to school. And she had to work really hard because my great-grandmother chose favorites. So she chose my auntie over my mom, and she always chose her over her, and to make it very obvious. So my mom had to work even harder to prove herself to my great-grandmother and to her aunts and uncles. And for her to go to school was like a big thing for her. And when she came here to the United States 16 years ago, she always wanted to learn English. She still hasn't learned it yet though. Still made it by, and she got her GED. So she told me to continue working hard so I could have a better life than she did.
Hello, my name is Isaiah, and I will be talking about my father. My father grew up in Espanola, New Mexico. He pretty much lived a pretty simple life. I mean, he didn't have any troubles in his life. I mean, when he was older, both his parents died from a heart attack right before I was born. So I mean, that was a big thing with him and his 6 brothers and sisters. So it was very hard for him. But he was very athletic. Loved the game of baseball. He played basketball. He played football when he was little. But for the most part, he was pretty simple. And where I get the love of baseball is from him, because when I grew up, I used to watch a lot of baseball. He was an LA Dodgers fan, and I am that too. So I love them. So he was pretty much like brought me into baseball, and I love it. And I want to do something when I'm older with it. But for the biggest like lesson in life that he told me was just to live life to the fullest. I mean, not everyone's gonna be there all the time. So I mean, just have fun and live a good life.
My grandpa is from Mexico, Chihuahua, and he is a very caring person. He's a carpenter. He's always worked with people, helping them out with their houses and like giving them free stuff that he does. He has always been a caring and loving person, especially with my grandma. Ever since they were like 15 or 18, they would go on dates and he would take them out on a green tractor and just go on cruises and like send her notes through emails, and like he was always caring, and that's what like I love about him, because even if people don't show him the same thing, he still does it. He cares about everyone, even if they don't. And that's something that has really affected me, because even if people don't care like about anyone or anything, like you still have to give them the same, like you still have to care for them. And that's one thing that he always taught me, and that's what I love about him.
My name is Peter, and I asked my grandma what the most important lesson in life was. And what she told me was to work hard, have a good work ethic, and always keep family in mind. When she first had my father and my uncle, she was very young. She got married young and had children very young, and my grandfather got drafted to the Korean War. So while he was at war, she was a young mother at home with 2 children, and it was, as you could imagine, very hard. So she had to have family help her out with certain things, and she realized after this period in her life was over that family was one of the most important things in life. So that's what she told me, and she just, while this was happening, kept in mind to always work hard, no matter what the circumstance. Just keep working, even if you don't have a lot.
So my name is Gene, and I'm going to be talking about my mother. So my mother grew up in upstate New York. She had a pretty normal life. She went to high school. She had lots of friends. But then when she was 15, my age, her parents forced her to get pulled out of school and move onto a boat. And she had to be homeschooled with her brothers and sisters. And she was really pissed at this at first. She didn't want to leave her friends. She didn't want to leave her home and her school. But eventually she had to do it because it was her parents. And she got on the boat. And when she was on, she realized it was amazing. Like, she really liked it. She said it was one of the most freeing times in her life, because she was literally able to travel anywhere. She had so much freedom and stuff. And this led to her later in life having this freedom, wanting to travel all over the world. So it led to her making decisions like going to India or moving to Japan for 2 years even though she had no money, or traveling around Africa. So I guess the biggest lesson in her life is to travel around the world even if you don't have the money, or even if it's scary.
My grandpa, he's from Namiquipa, Chihuahua, Mexico. And since he was 7 years old, he had to work with my great-grandpa, his dad. They'd go up the mountain to chop wood or take the cattle up there. And there was times where my grandpa would leave him there in the mountain, and he'd have to spend the night to take care of the cattle, or if they were like in the middle of chopping wood and he had to stay there, my great-grandpa would come home and leave him up there. And he'd have to sleep like on top of trees and stuff like that, because there was like wild animals like coyotes or snakes. And then the next morning, his dad would go up there and they'd start working all over again. So my grandpa never really had an education. I think he went to first grade was the last grade he went up to. And so he's always worked. Once he started getting older, he was able to get jobs that paid him a little more, which made him more independent and was able to help the family with money because they were really poor. And when he met my grandma, they came to the United States, which was like 38 years ago. And still to this day, he works really hard. He's always liked to work. If he has a day off, he'll do something around the house to keep busy. And I think that's gone past to like my mom and her siblings. They've always worked really hard, and they've always been hardworking people. And I think it's showed me that you need to work really hard for what you want, and that's kind of what my grandpa says to me, that if you want something in life, you just need to keep working hard, because he started off working in Mexico to being here in the United States, where he still has to work, but he has a better life than what his parents had. So I think it's really important to keep working hard to succeed in life.
So I'm Dylan, and I interviewed my mom's fiance. His name is Roger Montoya. He's from West Las Vegas. And West Las Vegas is kind of the rough part of town, and he didn't really have an easy childhood. He got into a lot of fights at school. He didn't have a father figure, so he had to provide for his family in his dad's absence. You know, he had to work after school and just give some of the money he made to his mom just to help her out. And they didn't have a whole lot, you know. They lived in a small, like, 2-bedroom house for like 4 people. Wasn't that easy. And then after high school, he went and joined the military. He in the Air Force. He was working on planes, and he got married there, and he had to pay for his wife to go to college while he was in the Air Force. So, and he had to take care of his kids. You know, his wife would go to school, and he'd take care of the kids, and then she'd come home, and he'd have to go to work. So he didn't really get to spend a whole lot of time with his family like the way he wanted to, but he did like the best he could. And he told me this one story of like he was with his daughter in the mall in Albuquerque, and like his daughter was kind of a brat, and she kind of is now, even though she's fully grown. But so like she was complaining about her clothes. She wasn't happy or something, and so he yelled at her about it, and he tried grabbing her arm, and then she started screaming out "stranger" in the middle of the mall, and he got pretty scared, and so he took her over to a bench and calmed her down. But yeah, I don't know, just through like his life, he's learned the lesson that like he needs to treat people with respect, and like maybe if he hadn't like yelled at his daughter so quickly, could have changed the outcome of the situation. And you just need treating others like the way you want to be treated. It's important. And respect is like the foundation for all relationships.
So I interviewed my mother. Her name is Margarita Rodriguez. She grew up in Delicias, Chihuahua. So when I asked her what her biggest lesson in life was, she said it was that she should have enjoyed her youth and enjoyed her education, like appreciated it, because she did get married when she was 18, I think. So she was one of 10 kids. Yeah. So she was the consentida of my grandpa. He would call her La Huita. She dropped out of high school as a freshman, but she had really great grades. She started working when she was 7. She would walk around with her sister Elia, which was younger than her, and they would ask anyone if they needed help cleaning or something. She met my dad in a car parts factory. He was the manager and she was a worker. He was the only boyfriend she ever had. Yeah, so they got married. He kind of sort of forced her to live with him. They moved here to Santa Fe when I wasn't born yet. He was already sort of a drunk before that, but it got worse when he got here. He got more jealous because he saw that she was trying to thrive. He wouldn't let her work. She had to stay home with us all the time, and if he found out she left the house, he would beat her, or he'd get jealous because, I don't know, someone looked at her the wrong way. My brother would usually take the worst of it because, well, he was the oldest and he'd try to protect her. He finally convinced her to leave when I was 3, and then we moved in with my aunt for a while. Funny story that was kind of weird. So when we were with my aunt, one day my mom was out working and he decided to come over, and he took my brother and my sister, and he left me because I was too small. I still needed my mom. He brought him back after a while because I guess it was too much for him, but yeah. Now I'm 15 and my mom has a awesome husband who I still don't like, but she does. He treats her well, and yeah, so her biggest lesson was that she should have, I don't know, taken her own life into her own hands. And
Number 2
Yeah.
is you gotta keep it really simple in life, right? There's a Chinese idea called pu. It literally, the best translation is the uncarved block. Why I mention this? So many people, and I've seen it myself in my family, in my friends, who spend years of their life trying to pound a square peg into a round hole with any number of things. Job, love life, what friendships, whatever. And the fact of the matter is that sometimes you gotta sit back and look and say, what is this really? What can I use it for? Like, there's a story. There was a few 100-year-old tree, and a house builder looked at the tree, and this tree was just nasty. It had thick bark, crooked branches, knots all in it, and he said, I could never build a house from that, ever. And a woodcutter came along, and a woodcutter said, I could never cut it down. The bark's too thick, the knots are too many. But the person who looks at life in the simplest manner will look at that tree, and instead of saying, I should cut that down and try to make a house, or I should try to cut that down and make firewood, which is never going to happen, why don't you just sit beneath the tree and enjoy the shade?
When I called my dad, my heart was racing and my hands were getting real sweaty. And while it was ringing, I was wondering what he's gonna say and how I'm gonna deal with it. When he first got convicted of attempted murder, it was when I was 2 years old, and he got out when I was 9, which was in 2009. I asked him what was the most trouble he's been in prison for, and he told me this one time he got in a fight with this one guy because he was using his sink and he cheap shotted him. So my dad waited till the man went in the shower, and he jumped him in the shower and then took him to the cell and beat him up really bad, and he had his homeboys like wait so the guards don't see or anything like that. And the biggest regret for him and the biggest lesson he learned was that he just really wishes that he can be in my life again, and that if he wasn't born into a gang, that like maybe his life could have been different. And
My dad, he's a good man. He worked hard all his life. When he was young, they played games outside. They didn't live on much. His parents, they never had birthday parties. They didn't have a lot of things. But my dad, they had a neighborhood bike. One of the neighbors bought him a bike, and everybody in the whole neighborhood would use it. They would have everything. They'd share everything. But my dad, he lived in a family. The neighborhood was full of cousins, family, and they're just like really, really poor. But he'd always get in trouble. He always had these stories about getting in trouble. If you did something wrong, every family member would just pretty much beat on you. He'd go to his auntie's house and he'd get smacked. Go to his grandma's house, they'd hit him. Then he'd get to his parents' house and then all hell would break loose because it's the worst. Then he worked construction for 11 years as a kid. He learned how to pave cement, block it, and smooth it out. His life compared to mine is like nothing. I played Xbox, or I had a PlayStation 2. I live luxury. My dad, he got hit. He's been electrocuted. He had hard work. I've barely even worked construction and I hate it. It's crazy, but my dad's, one of his biggest life lessons is just, you gotta work hard to what you want, and there's always time for fun, but it's the work that gets you to success, education. He never liked school. He got through high school, elementary school, and middle school easy, but when he got to college, he was kicked out twice. On his third year, he got his bachelor's degree, and he became a drug court assistant, helping people get through their addictions and stuff. And then he stayed in New Mexico pretty much all of his life. He went to New Mexico State University, and he met my mom at a meeting for drug court. That's how they met, and I was born here in New Mexico.
So when my mother was pregnant with my baby sister, my grandpa was in a very bad accident. He was driving home from work one day and he got ran off the road and he ended up hitting his head on the car window, and so he just went home afterwards, and about a month later my uncle saw that his right side of his body wasn't functioning properly, and so he took my grandpa to the hospital, and the doctor said that had he taken him like an hour later, my grandpa probably would have died because he had a blood clot in his brain. And so that was really scary for my mom and just like my whole family. And there's like a lot of things that have happened in my family that just, really suck, and how my mom gets through them is with her faith. And I always ask her, how does she keep so strong, and like how does she continue going? And she says that's the one thing that I know that I've learned, is that you have to keep your faith and you'll get through it. And so she puts all her trust in God, and she has faith that things will work out well, and she's definitely passed that to me and my sisters and I, because whenever we're in a tough situation, we just think, if we have faith, we'll get through it, and I definitely think that's helped me a lot in my life.
So for my interview, I interviewed my mom, and instead of talking about herself, she talked about her grandma, my great-grandma, Aurora Fernandez, and she told me a lot of stories about her, about how she was the firstborn of a really big family with like 15 kids in it, and her parents were busy all the time, so she had to act as the parent for the other kids, so she never got a chance to go to school or get educated at all. So she never got an education. And she started a family when she was really young, at 17. She got married when she was 17 and had 13 kids. And she grew up really poor, and they didn't really have like money. So I think the best life story I learned from my mom talking about her grandma was that no matter how hard things are or how hard you have to work, you just have to persevere and keep going.
So my dad grew up in Mexico, in Guanajuato City, and he as a child had a really tough life because apart from my grandparents being really poor, he was born with a cleft lip, which limited his childhood to him not being able to go outside and play with his friends because he was embarrassed that they would judge him because of that. He actually couldn't have his surgery until he was in middle school after he dropped out of school because of the same reason that my parents didn't have much money. And he came here when he was 30 to the United States when he was 32, which after he lived 2 years before he met my mom, and he was turning into an alcoholic and he was doing really bad choices here until he met my mom and he was more comfortable with her, and he was turning himself because he knew that he had a responsibility with me, even if I wasn't his daughter. Which at the end, when I was in the interview, we heard the words that Mr. Trump was saying about immigration, and just looking at his face, just the pain that you could see about what was gonna happen with my family, with me and my mom. And the biggest lesson that I've learned from him is even through everything that you go through life, the obstacles in life, just to keep going forward, and no matter where you are, the place you are, the family that you're with or friends is what really makes it feel like home.
So I interviewed my grandfather. And so we didn't really go over any stories specifically related to the life lesson that he gave me, but one of the kind of stories I remember hearing from was the one where he came to New Mexico from San Francisco, and he built his own house by himself. Well, he had my grandma, but basically by himself, and they lived in their chicken coop while that happened. And so, it took a while. It was hard living in a chicken coop, right? And so when it was done, I think that was a really important moment for him, right? Because he did something completely on his own that was meaningful to his life in a very radical fashion, right? And so the kind of life lesson he gave me was that to trust in your own strength of character and to build a good self-esteem around real life kind of circumstances, I guess, real life abilities and things like that, and to not expect to be served by others, which is kind of a general thing, not really specific to anything. I kind of think that life lesson can be applied to that particular story pretty well, building your own house and not doing it with having other people do it, right?
When my mom first came from Mexico to live in America, she went to live with her sisters in Texas. Her sisters told their children to speak in English to my mom so that she would learn English. And this helped my mom a lot because now she speaks English, now she can write in English. That's very important to find a job here in America. So one of the biggest lessons my mom has learned is that it's important to be bilingual so you can communicate with people around you. And the way it has affected me is that now, when I was growing up, my mom and dad spoke to me in English and Spanish so that I would learn it better.
Okay, so my cousin Jeremy and I were driving right after I had to go to work. It was about 10 p.m. Yeah. And we were just driving home, hanging out, listening to Louis the Child, Love is Alive. And while we were on our way back, the song was making me feel a lot of stuff. And I'm not sure if it was the song itself or me hanging out with my cousin, because we've been close ever since, like, I was pretty much born. He was 7, I was born, and, like, he literally saw me, like, birthed, I guess. And it's just crazy how he would have never known that we would have been, like, great friends. And he's 22 now, and man, like, that is a big age gap. So, yeah. And he just pretty much teaches me everything I need to know, and he's like my role model pretty much in life. He's taught me everything I need to know, like, everything. Like, the person I am today is pretty much him, but younger, because he's that much of an influence on me. And
So,
yeah.
my dad, he's from Las Nieves, Durango, and he's always been caring and nice, but kind of shy at times once you meet him. And he's had it rough before he came, and I don't know, like, his biggest lesson that he told me that is just to spend time with the people that you love and never take anyone for granted, no matter what.
Alright, so my dad, he came from Mexico, and, like, he's done a lot with his life since he came from Mexico. In Mexico, he didn't really have anything. He used to work when he was 16, and he used to have to pay his own rent and buy his own clothes. And he came to Mexico, and he, like, tried to make the most. No, he came from Mexico, and he tried to make the most of it. And now he has his own business, and he has enough money to support my family, and he gets us what we need. And he's come a long way from being like low and, like, not having much in Mexico. And he's influenced me because he's told me my whole life, if you're going to do something, work hard, or else there's no point in doing it, because you're just going to be wasting your own time. And that's, like, influenced me to try harder now than before, because if I want something or I want to be better, I have to work hard to do it, or else I shouldn't
My
do
dad, he's always been into cars and building them, and when I was born, he told me that he wanted to have a car ready for me for when I was ready to drive. So throughout my whole life, he built me a lowrider, and it was a Cutlass Supreme. My car was a light blue, and on the back window it had praying hands, and my cousin did those hand by hand, I guess. And on the trunk it had a dark blue cholo man with sunglasses, and then it had a system in it, and the rims were center golds, and they would always shine every time I'd wash the car. And my dad was so proud when I would just drive up and it looked nice and shiny. And he always would tell me that he would love to watch his dad work on cars, and that his dad would never give up on whatever project he was working on, and he wanted to be exactly like him. So when I'm doing a project and I talk to him about it, he'll tell me, like, never to give up, even though I want to a lot. And him working on cars, like, I like it personally because he always taught me since I was a little girl. And the biggest lesson in life that he told me is to never give up.
I did my oral history on my mother, Jacqueline Fernandez Quesada. She grew up in Cuauhtemoc, Chihuahua, in a really poor part of town, with 5 other brothers and sisters. She was, she says that she didn't feel like a lot of love in that family. she would be bullied and picked on by her other brothers and sisters. And in Mexico, it's not like a bad thing to, spank your child. So she did get spanked and stuff like that, and she didn't like it. But she kept going through school, but in high school, she decided to drop out. But one of her sister's professors decided that she was a smart girl and he would make her come back to school. So she did, and she graduated, and one day she decided that she wanted to come to the United States. She didn't have like a reason to. She wasn't in trouble with the law. She wasn't in trouble with crime or anything. She just wanted to come here. So she did, and when she came, she felt very lonely. And she met my dad at one of the restaurants that she was working at. And she got pregnant, but she miscarried. But then she had another child, which was me. But my dad became an alcoholic after his mother died, and my mom decided to leave the relationship. She still didn't know good English, but she realized that she was not going to be able to survive with a child without a college degree. So she went to sign up for the nursing program, and they told her that there was no way that a non-English speaker would ever be able to go through the program, so they kicked her out immediately. So she signed up for some English classes. She got good at English, and she signed up again, and now she has her bachelor's degree, and she's going for a master's. And she just keeps trying to do things. She's become a black belt. She knows sign language, another language, and she also had another boy, which is my half brother named Joaquin, and his dad also his dad walked out on my little brother, which is sad. And my dad died of alcoholism some 2 or 3 years ago, and when he died, she finally let go of the resentment of him being not a good dad. But through everything, people turning her down, leaving her, her ultimate lesson in life is, even though everyone kind of puts people down, either they can't speak English, they're a different race, they're female, any sort of that, even though people might put you down, you still have to be good to everyone else. To never hold grudges against the world just because it's the way it is. So that's her ultimate lesson in life.
So my grandfather has taught me a lot of valuable lessons in life. He's taught me about respect, how to be independent, how it's important to work hard, and how you can overcome anything, big or small. And when I asked him about his biggest life lesson, I expected him to say one of those things that he's taught me, because those are things that I see in him. But in fact, he said his biggest life lesson was to always watch your back and to always know your surroundings. And I think that says a lot about him. He was born and raised in Nicaragua. He grew up dirt poor. He lived in a house with nothing but a dirt floor. And his grandmother, who he lived with, was very abusive. At a very young age, his mother left him to come to the United States, and he, at that point, had to become very independent. I mean, he had no other choice. And life in Nicaragua wasn't easy. It was pretty crazy. He lived through abuse with his grandmother. He even lived through wars. He lived through a war. I don't know which war it was, but he would see dead bodies on the streets, and then he actually lived through a couple natural disasters. He lived through an earthquake that actually killed thousands and thousands of people, so he would see even more dead bodies on the street. And despite all that he went through and all the hard times he had in his life, he managed to push through it all. And he is still the happiest, kindest, most respectful person I've ever met. And at a young age, he managed to save up money to come to the United States, and he was deported once, but made it back, taught himself English, and started a family. And now he's living the life he wants to live, and I really admire that. And I look up to him and the amount of strength he has, both mentally and physically.
So I interviewed my mom, Sonia Fuentes, and she is from Central America, so El Salvador, and she really didn't have a normal childhood. I guess you could say her parents they didn't take care of her and her sisters, and she would get abused often, and she would spend many weeks, hungry, not being able to find anything to eat. So it was really hard for her and her sisters to try to survive, I guess. So one thing that affected my mom a lot was her dad. So her dad was very, very abusive to her and even to her mom. So he would come home with different women every day, and my mom and her sisters would just watch him and how all the disgusting things he would do with these women. And my grandma would come home and find out, and she would chase my grandfather around with a knife, and with my aunt and mom watching. And that was just something that traumatized her. And even with me, if I have friends and I hang out with friends that are guys or anything, she, I guess, has trust issues because of what happened to her. And it doesn't has nothing to do with my friends, but what they did to her and how it left her really scarred. So her biggest life lesson is respect. So if you respect others, they'll respect you. And that's the one thing she learned, because her parents were very disrespectful to her. So yeah, respect is something that she learned in life and she continues to do. So
my dad moved to the U.S. when he was 16. He grew up dirt poor, and when he moved to the U.S., he started working really hard. Now he's the manager of Red Lobster. So I would say the lesson is work hard for what you want. Don't let anybody get in the way of what you want.
My grandpa, he's 80 years old now. He lives on the outskirts of Santa Fe, and I asked him what his biggest lesson he learned in life was, and he started to cry, and he told me trust not everyone, but you need to have trust. Don't hurt anyone, what the case may be.
My grandpa inspires me because he lost his dad at a very young age of a heart attack, and he had to step up and become the man of the family. Similar situation, I have to help my family too, with income, maintain the house, and chores. And the biggest lesson that I learned from this is to take care of your family. Family's number one.
So I interviewed my grandma, and her name's Bonnie, and my other grandma, my dad's mom, was really sick, and at the time we were fighting, I guess, and while she got sick, it was actually my dad's birthday, and I was at practice, and we were there till 1 o'clock in the morning. And they told us that night that she was gonna basically pass away because she had pneumonia and kidney failure. And she stayed there for about 2 weeks, and they then moved her to UNMH, and she was in ICU for the rest of the time. And after she got over her illness, she went to a rest home, kind of, I guess, to get over her being in an actual hospital, but it was kind of like a hospital. And she got sick again, so they moved her back to UNMH, and she then passed away.
it was hard because like we were fighting at the time, and I wish we weren't, and we were closer and we talked a little bit more. My grandma's biggest lesson in life was to never lie and tell the truth.
I'm going to be talking about my mom, Darlene Padilla. I asked her what was the happiest moment in her life, and she said that she couldn't think of a time that didn't involve my dad. She said that they met when they were 17 years old in senior year in high school, and they had a baby, or they fell in love and had a baby, and then they saved up enough money to buy a trailer just with a mattress and no furniture. And a few years passed and they had another baby. Then 10 years passed and they had another kid. And then a few years passed again and they had another baby. And then after about like 7 years, they started working for this really wealthy family, and she would take care of the children of the family. And one of the kids had a baby and they wanted to give it up for adoption, and they decided to adopt it themselves, and that was me. And then about 6 years passed and they bought their first house that they ever had. They had lived in trailers their entire lives. And my mom said that was one of the happiest moments she ever shared with my dad, because they had never lived in an actual house until then. They were 50 years old when they bought their first house, and they had been together for 43 years.
I interviewed my mom. She's very strong, kind, caring. She's always there when I need her, especially when I lost my grandmas. My grades dropped. I started pushing people away. I wasn't my like regular happy self. Till she told me that it's okay, that I had to I had to go through that process so I could move on and let it go. She's been in a couple of accidents and encounters with death, I guess. There's this one where the car, I think it was like, it flew off like a cliff thing, and she broke a bone somewhere near her waist, and she wasn't allowed to move. She had to stay in the bed for a while, and then her sister's wedding came up. She started using crutches, but she wasn't supposed to do anything. Then my uncle asked her to dance, and she ended up dancing all night. And she's someone in faith, I guess. She believes in miracles. I asked her why, or what made her believe in them. She said because me and my sister survived an accident. It was 3 years ago. It was a rollover. They said one or none of us would have survived, but they said we were lucky to survive. And now, yeah. And one of her favorite memories of me was when I lost my teddy bear. And I still have that teddy bear. She said we barely moved, and I didn't let anyone go to sleep until we found it. She said I was like praying to it until it was found. I never let anyone touch it to this day. And one of the mistakes she's learned a lesson from was not spending enough time with her parents. Even though she would go when they were sick, but if she could, she would be with them as much as possible. And she regrets not spending enough time with them, because you never know when they'll take their last breath or when they'll leave. Yeah.
Today, I'm going to be talking about my mother, Rebecca Stone, and I asked her and interviewed her about the happiest moments in her life and the biggest lessons she's learned. And she proceeded to talk about a story about how she went to college thinking that she was going to become a doctor of some sort, and when she was about 80% done with her schooling, she decided to drop out and become a massage therapist. And she told me that she had always thought about doing it, but she wanted the pay of a doctor because it would be better and we could live a super happy life. But then she came to realize that money isn't everything, and she wanted to have the experience of something she loved doing. So she went to massage school, became a masseuse, and now she's working at one of the best places in the world for massage. And I asked her what her biggest lesson was, and it was to always follow your gut and do whatever you felt was right and what you wanted to do. Never let anything hold you back.
So I interviewed my own mother. Her name is Dora Estefania Teran. She had a rough time growing up. At first, that she was like the fourth child that she was born in her family. In total, she had like 7 siblings with her. When she was 18 is when she finally moved to the U.S. with my dad, and never in her life she ever felt so alone. Because with my dad, she hasn't married my dad yet during the time. And when she started to move to New Mexico, both my parents live in Peña Blanca, which is the town I live in. Throughout the time when she was in Peña for around the first 5 years, she felt extremely homesick at the time. And with that, she started to have the idea to have a kid around the beginning 90s. She had her first child, but unfortunately passed away around a year. And after that, she was devastated, and she didn't want to live in the U.S. anymore. And she started to miss a lot of her family and friends. It's been rough for her, but 3 years after my older brother's death, she started to have another child, and by that she stayed committed to raise this child as the best as she could. That was my older brother. The more she stayed, the more unhappy she became with my dad. My dad had a good job being a construction worker, and there was a lot of fights between the two about like house bills and more or less stuff like that. And 2 years is when they started to split apart and move they moved away from each other. Until recently, around the time of recording this, it was like 6 months ago, where my dad started to live in Santa Fe and my mom started to stay in Peña, where I still live in to this day. Both of them had a lot of reasons for them splitting up for now. I just wish I knew a little bit more about that, but I think it wouldn't make a difference, and it's a lot better to have them split apart and begin with. To this day, I still respect my dad for his decisions, and I have to stay with my mom because someone has to look out for her and what her actions are. After hearing all of that, I asked her, "What's the biggest lesson you ever learned from your entire life?" She said she doesn't have one because right now her life is being renewed as a result. After that, I silently moved away, and my mother, I still respect her.
My mom is 31 years old. Her name is Cristina. She was born here but raised in Mexico. She told me her biggest lesson in life was to never forget where you came from and what you believe in.
Okay, so I interviewed my grandpa, and he grew up with like 3 siblings on a farm with his dad and his mother. I remember him telling me a story that his dad knew an owner of a Dunkin' Donuts, and his dad used to bring home the old donuts for the chicken to feed the chickens, and he used to sneak in there and eat the old donuts because they want to have a lot of sweet stuff in their house. There was a time where his three brothers, he was asleep, and they all like pinned him down and grabbed him and put him outside, and they tied his rope to his feet. They tied his feet up and put the rope on the tractor and drove the tractor around and carried him along with the tractor. He's all getting dragged. He said that his dad came home and his pants were all ripped. His dad got all mad at him. The biggest lesson that he gave us was stay in school, study hard, because he never finished. He works for a job that's alright, I guess. So, to get a good career so I could have a nice family, feed them.
So I interviewed my mom, and she told me many stories about her childhood and her teenage years. And I asked her who she missed the most, and she said her dad. I guess her dad would pick her up for her lunch when she used to go to Alameda School, and he would take her to go get burgers and stuff. And she really enjoyed his company, and she misses him. And she helped my grandma like raise all her kids when he passed away. And her biggest life lesson was to follow your dreams, because she didn't really do that when she was younger. She had different plans, but she told me to follow my dreams.
My story is about my dad, David Brown. He is the most influential person in my life, and he has worked just about every job you can think of. But the stories he always used to tell me were about his time in the music business. He managed Anthrax, Metallica, Raven. He did pre-production for Frankie Goes to Hollywood and a number of other bands and things. He was the tour manager for the Ramones. He also used to, after that he did, he managed various shopping centers around the country. And his biggest lesson in life was always be kind, because kindness gets you a long way in life. And the reason he said that was because when he was managing shopping centers, he always used to do the work that everybody else would like give to other employees. So like he always used to like help shovel snow and clean the bathrooms, and he would do a bunch of things like that. And he always said that every employee that saw him do that was shocked, and they always worked harder for him because of that.
So I interviewed my uncle. He is the oldest out of 8 kids. He is my mom's brother. I interviewed him in Mexico, Chihuahua. The reason I interviewed him was because he has always been an independent man. He has taught me a lot of lessons, especially when my grandma died a few years ago. She always taught every single one of her kids that they have to be independent and that they know what they have to do when it comes to work and school. And when my grandmother died, it impacted him the most because he was the one who like took care of her the most and was always there for her. And because of her death, he became even more independent. Now he became stronger. He just like, it didn't stop him doing what he was doing. He has 2 jobs now, and because of that, like, our family has also gotten even closer. Uncle has always stepped in to make sure that we stay connected, even though like we live in different places. And like the biggest lesson of life was to never stop, to always keep going no matter what obstacles you have. Never let anything stop you. You're gonna like continue and you're gonna have great ending.
My name is Alec, and
I'm gonna be talking about my great grandfather, Alfonso Lopez. He was he grew up in Tucumcari, a very small town. Almost nothing in the town. His parents owned a ranch. It's been in our family for about 3 generations now. And when he was on the ranch, his dad was forcing him to work the farm, to brand the cows, feed the cows, stack hay, and and then when he was about 18 or 19, he got drafted to World War II. After the war, he met my grandmother and had children with my grandmother. Had my grandpa and 2 other kids, and then my grandfather went to college, and all of a sudden my grandfather got lung cancer and got his leg amputated, and on his deathbed he told me that life's greatest lesson was to make your own path and to follow it, because if you let other people control yours, then it's not going to be the life you want to live.
Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about my dad. His name's Greg, and he's a really awesome stonemason. His biggest lesson in life was to stay positive, and still is to stay positive throughout anything bad life throws at him. Like 14 years ago when he got in a divorce with my mom, and he had to spend 14 years without his daughters. So after my mom left and moved to California with me and all 3 of my sisters, my dad was left with nothing, not one single piece of furniture in his house, and so his immediate reaction was to turn to drugs. He had no other, he thought he had no other, meaning in life, so that's what he chose to do. But 3 years now, he's been sober, and I am lucky, beyond lucky, to be living with him now instead of with my mom. And yeah, I'm just grateful.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see, no, I won't be afraid. Oh, I won't be afraid, just as long as you stand by me. So darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. If the sky that we look upon should tumble and fall, or the mountain should crumble to the sea, I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. And darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me. stand by me. Whenever